I am a staunch proponent of the separation of church and state, the separation of religion and government, as my friend would call it. I have no idea. You might completely agree with me.
You're a staunch proponent of the separation of religion and government.
Right.
I would agree to a point. It would depend on what we mean by this. So let's take examples.
Sure.
Do I think that a religious hospital that receives government funds should be forced to do an abortion? No. Do I think that a person of religious convictions has to somehow pocket their religious convictions before stepping in the public square? No. Do I think that Amy Coney Barrett should be disqualified from replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court because she's a devout Catholic? No. So
I agree with parts of most of those.
Okay. So let's point to an area where we might disagree. Where is that wall being breached where you think I'd fall on one side of the divide and you on the other?
So for example, I don't think anybody has to check their religion at the door when they become a public servant. However, if they legislate on behalf of a particular religion showing favoritism towards one over another or a religion over irreligion, that is a huge problem.
Agree completely.
Okay. Now, when it comes to, for example, I love the way you phrased it, a religious hospital being forced to perform an abortion.
St. Luke's or,
Sure.
Catholic hospitals.
The big problem here is that hospitals, from my perspective, should be secular. I love the fact, the only reason that we have religious hospitals and religious universities is because the monumental religious privilege that religions have endured and benefited from throughout history. They're tax-free institutions. They have people donating money to them. And fine, I have no problem with people doing good. Build a hospital, build a university. But if you're going to build a hospital that's going to service an entire community, then the hospital services need to be medically sound and not based on religious doctrine or dogma.
Well, the services of these hospitals are medically sound. What we're talking about is something that they agree. Not all hospitals do everything.
Not.
Hold on. There are children's hospitals that don't take adults.
I get it.
Right. There are cancer hospitals that don't take diabetes patients.
Sure.
If a Catholic hospital were to say, listen, we provide the full ensemble of medical services, we just don't do abortion, they are acting in line with their conscience. This is not to say that abortion is not available in the clinic across the street. Why would somebody who believes in freedom want to force somebody to act against their conscience?
Because
would you like it if I did that to you?
Because I don't care about your conscience if it's affecting whether or not somebody else can live.
It's not affecting whether someone else can live because that guy can go across the street.
If we have a Jehovah's Witness hospital that refuses to perform blood transfusions, is that okay?
Well, it's okay if you want to go there. I wouldn't go there.
I wouldn't either.
Right.
And that's awesome.
And let's just say that the only people who go there are Jehovah's Witnesses.
I'm thrilled that we're in both.
So you want to force them now to do blood transfusions?
No, I'm saying that you don't always have a choice about what hospital you go to or what medical services you go to.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons why we have government and government interaction and government oversight, because if my only medical provider within any reasonable driving distance of me will not provide that, what do I do? This is why the better example is the conscience of the pharmacist. Because first of all, a Catholic hospital, maybe a hospital that was built by Catholics, that was built with Catholic donations, that was built from Catholic donors, but not every doctor there is a Catholic, not every nurse there is a Catholic, not every patient there is a Catholic, so why should they all have to adhere to Catholic doctrine just because they built the hospital? Instead, the government should say, if you want to build a hospital, it needs to provide these services irrespective of your religion, and if your religion can't accommodate that, then you don't get to build a hospital.
I think here you're disrespecting a distinction between the public and the private sphere. In every other domain of life, we have private sector institutions, educational institutions, social work institutions, and those institutions develop policies based upon their mission and their conscience.
I'm fine with that as long as they don't give government funding. But as soon as they do, it becomes something that is in the public interest.
Okay, so let's take Planned Parenthood, right? Planned Parenthood is
with 1 minute left,
Yeah.
starting on Planned Parenthood.
Well, I
Okay.
was going to say, before you guys touch that,
that'll come
why
up.
don't we do a little bit of a vote? Do you guys, and just use your voice, we'll do voting for either to keep the conversation going for the rest of the night or to move to Q&A. So let's go Q&A. All right, and then if we do keep the conversation rolling, we'll go into Trump. So conversation rolling. Okay, well let's do that.
How much time have we got left?
We got about a half hour.
All right.
We should transition into Trump.
Be careful, because he's promising Trump, and we started with God, and we didn't even finish that. And you had 3 things for God. I'm not even sure we finished one of them.
I think we're going to need a couple
It's
more
okay.
nights with you guys, to be honest.
You wanted to go to
Well,
Planned Parenthood.
Let me, since you mentioned God, let me kind of make a point about that, because I think that's where my 3 points were going.
Okay.
Let's take the question I ended with: is there life after death?
I have no idea.
You have no idea, and
Do you
neither,
know?
and neither do I.
Cool.
Of course not. But here's my point. If I say I believe in life after death, you would say that's an irrational position, Dinesh. Because
No, I would say, what's the evidence for it?
what's the evidence for it? And I would say, I don't have any evidence for it, and neither do you. But
But I'm not believing it.
right. But it is, and this is the key point, it is in the nature of the subject that no empirical evidence could settle the question, because death is the termination of experience. And therefore, for you to demand evidence in a domain where evidence is unavailable is the height of foolishness.
So when you say death is the termination of experience, it sounds like you're arguing that there is no after death.
I'm arguing that our natural life, I think the religious believer is fully on board with this, is complete. Our natural life in this world will completely, irrevocably come to an end with death. And so in the empirical world that we live in, yes, there is not going to be evidence, nor will there be evidence in the future, that settles the question of what happens after natural experience ends. And the question about whether there is any, let's remove the Christian context. Look at the Hindu context. The Hindu context is that there's a life after death, right? It's a natural life, but it's not in this domain. There's a world behind the world, and that natural life will occur there. But we have no access to it because we live in the empirical world that is, according to Hinduism, something of an illusion. Leaving aside the doctrinal parts of it, all I'm getting at is this. Here's a point where you are demanding that I settle the issue on the basis of an empirical evidence that is never forthcoming. And yet, you agreed with me at the beginning, this is one of the questions that all intelligent people think about. It's relevant to their life because the answer to it, even if we don't know it, determines how we should live today. And all I'm trying to get you to admit is that since you don't know any more than I do, it is the same leap of faith that I'm taking to say that there is, that you're taking to say that there isn't, because you don't have 1 ounce of evidence any more than I do. One way or the other.
Give me a round of applause. That's outstanding. Because after an hour and so sitting here and having explained this over and over again, you managed to get my position exactly wrong. Because I'm not asking you to settle it.
Do you believe in life after death?
I do not believe that there is life after death.
Perfect. So your position and
hang
mine...
on. Okay. That is not the same as I believe there is no life after death. I'm saying, we both sat here and said we don't know what.
Okay, and I'm saying
you're saying I believe there's something afterward.
Okay, but you're missing my point.
And I'm saying I don't believe that.
Right, and I'm saying I do, and my position is not in any iota less rational than yours.
Yes, it absolutely is, because you are accepting something and acknowledging that you have no evidence for it, and I am not accepting that something because there is no evidence. We agree there's no evidence, and you are saying you are rational to accept it despite the absence of evidence, and I'm saying you're not, which is why I don't accept it.
But to demand evidence, in the opening page of the Critique of Pure Reason, Kant says, many of us profess to be apostles of reason, But never once do we step back and ask this question: what is it that reason can actually know? In other words, we live in a world where reason has the ability to arbitrate certain questions, and on other questions, reason is, in a sense, completely deaf. It has nothing to say at all. And you admitted, for example, that if you were a Greek in the 5th century BC, your reason, in the empirical sense, would have nothing to say about the world beyond the observational world. Your reason is, in a sense, silent.
Well, I have to go to the 5th century.
Okay, or today. But here's my point.
I accept whatever the data show, and I cannot go beyond that and claim that I'm reasonable.
Okay,
I can go beyond it. You clearly have. But I don't get to claim that I'm reasonable by saying, you and I have no evidence of what happens tomorrow, but I believe this.
Okay, well, let's take a secular example to test this proposition.
Okay.
I take two guys, let's just call them A and B, you and me, and let's just say that I say, I believe that there is life on other planets.
Okay.
You say, to match this, I don't.
No.
Right?
That's.
You say.
What do I say? I don't know. What's the evidence
you
to
say,
support your belief?
Okay, so you say, I don't know if there's life on other planets, and I don't either.
Okay.
And I don't either.
But you believe it. So my next question is, what is the evidence that causes you to believe this?
Okay, so now I might say something like, well, the reason I believe it is we have an unimaginably vast universe. We might even be living in an infinite universe. Life as we know it, we are on one tiny speck of this universe. And life as we know it has developed by various causes, natural causes in the universe. What is the actual likelihood that this event, remotely improbable though it might be, and we can't say what the probability of it is, but let's just say it's 1 in 100 million. But we live in a universe that's vastly bigger than that. Mm-hmm. So what are the odds that this combination of attributes called human beings exists nowhere else in this vast universe? Not just human beings that are like us, but life of any sort at all. What's the probability of that? And let's say I think that that's improbable for the reasons I've just outlined, and therefore I believe it. I don't know it. If you ask me to produce an alien, I can't. But I would argue my belief is in no way irrational. Now, you might say, I'm going to wait until the alien walks on stage, and then I'll believe it. Or because your reason for disbelief may require much higher degrees of certainty than mine are. But I would argue, in me believing it and you not believing it or awaiting the evidence, this is a fake pomposity that comes out of just saying, because I don't know for sure, therefore, somehow my belief is more rational than Dinesh's, even though Dinesh has all kinds of good reasons for believing what he does. Of course, if empirical evidence shows up, I'll be as open as you to pay attention to it. But I'm not in some epistemological second-class status because I believe something for which I have my own reasons, even though there's not empirical proof.
Okay. So the example that you gave, first of all, at some point, somebody can go back through this video and find the number of times that he says what my position is likely to be versus how many times I've tried to even attempt what your position is. I actually ask. So if you're just going to set up straw men, it's going to be really easy for me to knock them down.
No, I mean, I'm sorry.
Every time you do that, you say, you could say this. And here's the thing, the examples that you're talking about, we live in this vast universe, what are the likelihoods, what are the odds,
right.
All this stuff. Great questions. And there are things that we can address with data. But the belief that results from that, is not, I believe, the justified belief from that is not, I believe there is life outside of Earth, or intelligent life outside of Earth, we'll stick with that. The warranted belief is, I believe that there is a likelihood, consistent with the data, of life outside of that. That's different than this is the case, okay?
I agree with that.
Sure, and this is what I'm saying. It's the example that you're giving is fine. The summation is perhaps sloppy in the sense that we're not distinguishing between I believe there's life outside of Earth versus I believe that the data show that there's a likelihood of this, because my response to that is to say, I think that that is a good estimation of the data that we have. And by the way, I think we can go further because we can look at something like the Drake equation, which will evaluate those things about what the probability is, and also considering the likelihood of when technologies get so advanced, are they more likely to destroy themselves or die from not paying attention to climate change or whatever. Sorry.
Well, no,
But hang on. But when we do that, I strive to be as careful as I can with what I say, to not overreach, to not pretend that, I pretend to read minds on stage, but not to pretend I can read minds in this stuff. And to also say, I should have a discrete position that is clear, based on the evidence. And if that current position is the evidence does not warrant a position, so there may be plenty of good evidence to suggest that life probably in some form occurs throughout the galaxy. We have found the building blocks of life out in space from exploration. So it would seem likely that possibly there is life, whether it's intelligent life, what's possible, who knows outside there. That's one thing. But to say, I believe there is intelligent extraterrestrial life, just based on the likelihood that we're not necessarily alone, it doesn't rise to that level. It's about being consistent with the data.
I'll try to illuminate the point by pivoting into politics, because I think that sometimes when we talk about God and religion, we establish sort of special distinctions and categories that are not normal in everyday life. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of beliefs.
Okay.
I believe it's likely that Trump will be reelected.
I do too.
I believe that if Bernie were elected, the day after, the stock market would take a severe hit.
A more severe hit than it has in the last couple of days?
Probably. Because Bernie would be a walking virus for 4 years.
I don't believe that, but that doesn't mean that I'm convinced you're wrong.
Correct. So what I'm getting at here is, now again, I'm making these statements of I believe that if Trump is reelected, the market will do well over 4 years. But when I say these things, I'm stating beliefs anchored in my knowledge of politics. There's no empirical fact that I'm leaving out. And it would mean no objection to these beliefs for you to say to me somehow, Dinesh, my position on this is actually rather Jesuitical. I draw a distinction between warranted belief and beliefs that are ultimately don't have sufficient warrant. I would say we're talking about the future, Matt. None of us knows, I grant that. In that sense, it resembles life after death. We're plugging in all the data we have, and we're making a judgment about something that affects our life, just like life after death does. We have to act upon it because we have investments and portfolios. We have to cast our own vote. So we're going to make decisions about the future based on what we think is going to happen. My belief is in no way irrational because I cannot have either certitude about it or I don't have the kind of empirical evidence that would enable me, in some senses, to declare the belief warranted. No, it is warranted.
So, first of all, here we go again. I don't disagree. The thing is that you have beliefs about what's likely to happen in the economic and political realm, and you base it on actual data. I have no objection to that at all. But this, I think, gets to the heart of where and how you and I are dramatically different. Not just in epistemology and what may or may not warrant believing in something without evidence, because I can't imagine both acknowledging, I have no evidence, but I believe it anyway. That's not the same thing as what we're talking about now. You have a lot of evidence. You have market research. You have other information. You know what's likely to happen. You know where the majority of people are, what they're looking forward to. Here's the marked difference between the two of us. At every instance tonight, when we got to something that was potentially political, or that was about policy, you went to money. Where are they spending their money? Are they building this on the coast? What are the markets going to do? What is this going to do? I don't give a rat's ass about money. I give a rat's ass about human beings. And as a humanist, I'm looking at how the world can be better with policies that lift people up. And I'm not talking about, I have no problem with Bernie. I voted for him before. I'm not a Bernie or buster. I'm not a Bernie bro. Matter of fact, they annoy the crap out of me. And yet I will be supporting probably almost certainly whoever the Democratic nominee is for a number of reasons. But I think the big one is I have a focus that is on human beings and doing whatever we can to lift people up, and not to make rich people richer or to make markets just better so that we can say we made markets better. Because if the market goes nuclear, and just it's not like we're not already the wealthiest country as it is, but if we all got, if we all got wealthier, if the United States market just went through the roof, I don't think we've lifted all boats. I think the gap in income, the gap in wealth, the gap in value of human beings is widening, and I don't think focusing on the market is the fix for that.
Okay. First of all, in the 2 or 3 times that I've cited markets, my purpose in citing them was as mechanisms of information. In other words, a market is a sign of how seriously people with money who have to put their money on the line take a piece of data, right? So I'm not using the market as the market is always right. I'm simply using the market as if people really thought this was going to happen, they would start moving their cash. And that's just a fact about people.
Sure,
right?
I have agreed.
Okay.
If somebody really thought this is what the market was going to do, that's where they'd move their cash.
Exactly.
But what they think about the truth has no bearing on what the truth is. Just like the number of people who believe something, how strongly
okay,
they
you
believe
said
it,
that.
whether they're going to,
Okay.
that's not a thing.
Now, you threw this contrast up between, you mentioned the issue of inequality.
Yeah.
And you said you don't care about markets, you care about people.
I was being hyperbolic. to make the
Hyperbolic,
point.
but let's
Of
zoom
course I
into
care
that
about
a little
markets.
bit.
It's not like you throw it out.
Of course, but what I was going to say is this: the reason, and I agree, by the way, we have more inequality now than we had, for example, in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true also that CEOs and entrepreneurs today make a lot more money as a multiple, let's say, of the average worker than they did in the 70s. The reason for that, I think, is because CEOs in the 70s didn't do a whole lot. If you were a CEO of Hewlett-Packard or Ford Motor Company, by and large, your job is organizational. You're an administrator. You say, I'll open a new plant over here, I'll do this over there. The entrepreneurs who have made gargantuan amounts of cash, I would mention, the obvious ones, even Bloomberg, but certainly Jeff Bezos, certainly Steve Jobs. The reason that they got so rich is precisely because they have augmented human welfare to such a gargantuan degree. Everybody who people didn't even, normally we think of markets as supply response to demand. But as far as I know, there's not one person in the world who wrote Steve Jobs and goes, you know what, take an ordinary phone, figure out how it can take photos, let's figure out how it can do email, texting, put all these features, and then get rid of the stylus, use your finger. Here's what I'm getting at. Apple built the phone before we knew we couldn't live without it.
Sure.
And everybody who put money...
I can, though, because I'm on Android.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But what I'm getting at is everybody who made these people like Bezos and Jobs so rich did it happily by waiting in long lines in the Apple store because of great boosts in human welfare that they were able to create. So I would argue we're living in an entrepreneurial boom. Now, the last time this happened is in the era that progressives call the Gilded Age, but the Gilded Age is also the age of the telegraph, the car, the airplane. So that was actually the biggest communication revolution of all time. We're living through the second biggest one. And all I'm getting at is these are huge amounts of human welfare that have been created by entrepreneurs for which they're being rewarded voluntarily by people who are happy to pay $300 to get a phone. So where does the social injustice come from?
Oh, okay.
Who is Steve Jobs ripped off?
How many phones does Steve actually manufacture?
A lot.
0. Steve Jobs never manufactured a phone in his life.
Well, Apple contracts, so what?
I'm in agreement with you. Entrepreneurs, by all means.
I mean, how many cars did Henry Ford himself personally make?
Yep.
I agree.
The thing
it was
is,
done by the assembly line.
If we're gonna determine how much, the invention itself is important, and there are certainly entrepreneurs who are as self-made as possible. However, that's not the sum total of wealth, and it doesn't mean that if I invent something and then have 25,000 employees, some of which I don't give a particularly good living wage to, manufacture those phones so that I can make as much money as possible off of my invention, that I'm actually doing something that is in the best benefit of society or that is boosting society.
And you get to decide that. You, a magician,
Sure I do.
sitting here, decide, here's a voluntary transaction. Well, let's elaborate the example so we can see capitalism in its pure form. let's just say everyone in this audience has $10. So we live in a socialist utopia. We all have $10, okay? And then you stand up and do a magic trick, and you say, I'll do this magic trick if some of you would agree to pay me $1. Okay? And let's just say that 25 people in the audience said, we'll give you $1. So everybody else clears the room, you do the magic trick, they give you $1. Our perfect equality is now interrupted by inequality, right?
Wait, what's the inequality? Because in that example,
hold on. So
I manufactured 100%
yes, you
of
did.
the magic myself.
Correct. But here's the point. The point is that, well, you might have an assistant and you bought equipment and you might have bought that at cheap prices and so on. We'll leave all that aside. The main point is that the guy who gave you the $1 thought your magic trick must be worth at least $1.
Yes, but I'm not complaining about the person who willingly gives Apple money for their phone.
Okay,
And I'm not, by the way, I'm not ragging on Apple or the iPhone or any of that.
Right.
I'm saying, yes, there are entrepreneurs, and yes, there are people who justifiably go from nothing to immense wealth. I'm not objecting to wealth. I'm not advocating for an absolute equality where everybody gets $10 and that's all you're ever going to get.
But you're stepping aside. Let's take Walmart. The ordinary guy who works in Walmart at the cash register makes $25,000 a year. That's the average pay at Walmart for a cash register guy. The managers at Walmart make about $200 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Now the family that owns Walmart makes a killing, as you know. Here's my question. Who are you? These are people who voluntarily show up for work. They could go work at Target. They choose to work at Walmart. They could be at the cashier at Vaughn's or at Kroger's. They want to be at Walmart. They take the best job they have. There's an agreement between them and Walmart about how much to be paid. They should be paid for. All I'm saying is, where do you get to waltz in and say things like baseball players make too much? And
I didn't say that.
Okay. Or that Apple should be paying more money to its managers because Steve Jobs made more than they did.
It's not because Steve Jobs made more than they. Basically, you're saying, where do I get off coming in when these people voluntarily work?
Right.
And so that if we can get them to work for $1.50 an hour so that they have to work 5 jobs and
But pause here. Let's check the language. What do you mean by get them?
I just let you talk on and on about it.
Okay, go ahead.
You're suggesting that who am I to say that it's a bad move for us to pay some people so little to pay a cash register worker $25,000 a year? I can tell you who I am to say that. I am someone who may end up in that position, but I'm also someone who may have family members in that position, who may have friends in that position. I'm also somebody who lives and works in a society that benefits from them, and I benefit from them staying healthy and productive in society. It's not to pretend that the massive wealth disparity is all down to somebody had a really good idea and other people agreed to work for a pittance, and that's just fine. It may be true that some people had a good idea and some people work for a pittance, but that doesn't mean it's just fine. It doesn't mean it leads to a better society. It doesn't mean that people can afford health care. And if they can't afford health care, then guess what? They're potentially getting me sick. If they can't, this is why the government steps in to suggest that you need to vaccinate your kids, because vaccines don't frickin' cause autism. They protect and save lives. I know you didn't say that.
Yeah.
This is something I would trumpet. And there are people out there who can't have vaccines, who depend on herd immunity. And similarly, they need the person who's checking them out, handling their money, giving them back their change, that when they cough in their hand and hand it back to them, that they at least have the same opportunities, that healthcare should be a basic human right. And if it's not, then we definitely have to pay people more. The number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States.
The issue of healthcare is worth focusing on for a moment, because to me, the problem of healthcare is really simple.
This is where we talk about Trump.
I didn't say the solution. I didn't say the solution.
Yeah, no.
I said the problem. The problem of healthcare can be summarized in this way. The guy who receives the service is not only not paying for it, but he has no idea what it costs. It never occurs to him or her to ask what it costs. And this crucial fact is known by every provider of healthcare who recognizes that a third man, not present here, is paying for it. And it's going to be very easy to screw that guy because he's not here. And so we will be sending him a bill, which could be as gargantuan as we like, because the guy getting the service is never going to show the slightest interest in the social cost being borne by that third guy. Let's call him the taxpayer. So it's a rip-off scheme, engineered ultimately, and everything would work like healthcare if we allowed it to. You said healthcare is a right. Well, I would say eating is a right. I have a right to eat. I shouldn't starve. I live in a prosperous country. So let's say I were to tell you, all right, you have a right to food. When you go to Vaughn's to fill your cart, just take what you think you need. And go to the counter, and then they'll just check you out. And so you look at the milk, and milk was, normally it's $2.50, and you buy 2 cartons. You say, I'll buy 10, because I'm not paying. So you fill up your cart. You show up at the counter. Now, here's the important point. Your behavior is completely understandable. You're taking as much as you can. The guy behind the counter, by which I mean the management, they realize that the guy in the line is not paying. So they realize milk doesn't have to cost $2.50. It could cost $25. Why? Because that guy's not going to ask, and he's not going to care. And so, as long as we get to shaft some third guy who's going to be paying for it, we're going to jack up the prices. And what I'm trying to say is that that's in all the areas where we want entitlements, that's the scam that we've been subjected to. Colleges. Why do you think my daughter went to Dartmouth? It cost me $63.
Because you did.
Because I did. Yes.
If you ask the easy questions, I got to take them because I know I'm going to get them right.
Yes, that's an easy one. But why does college, in an age where technology should make educational delivery services easier, in an age where colleges already have gigantic endowments, why these high bills? And the answer is really simple. The guy who's walking in the door is not paying. The college knows he's got a $10,000 Pell Grant, he's got all these loans, people willing to put... So what we do is, even though inflation is 0% or 1%, we're going to increase our fees 20% every year for the past 30 years. Why? Because we are conspiring with the student and his family to screw the third man who's not here. So what I'm trying to get at is that...
Hang on. Hang on.
You are, exactly. And so either you are aware of this and will be voting for Trump, or you're a happy sucker who wants to pay even more, because he is okay with this collective rip-off scheme.
Yeah.
So, but if the guy who got the services was paying our healthcare, let's think of it this way. Let's say the government were to say, all right, the people that you're worried about who go bankrupt, they do that because of catastrophic health situations, right? Catastrophic health situations are, I need a heart surgery, I need a new lung, and this is going to cost $100,000, I don't have $100,000. What I'm saying is we could insure the entire American population against catastrophic events, kind of like hurricanes and so on, except in this case disease, and allow people to pay, at least people who are not poor people on Medicaid, pay their routine health care bills.
Wait, are you okay with Medicaid?
I'm okay with Medicaid for the poor who can't afford it, yes.
Socialist.
No, it's not socialist.
No, I know. It's just
I'm a safety netist.
I'm just waiting.
Yeah.
There's a couple points I have to address.
Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is, in an American healthcare system where we paid our routine healthcare bills, and the government insured us against catastrophic illness, you would magically begin to see healthcare prices plummet. You go to the doctor, he goes, I'm going to run 7 tests. You're like, really, 7 tests? Just because I have a cold and a sore throat? What are the 7 tests? Why do I need 7 tests? Suddenly the guy next door would be offering 4 tests and half the price. And I'd walk across the street because I'm paying. If the government gave us a $10,000 healthcare voucher and said to you, listen, if you can spend it all on healthcare, but if you only spend $1,000, you can pocket the other 9. Notice the tremendous behavioral change that would sweep across this country. Suddenly people would demand to know what healthcare should cost, and it would change the system. So that's all I'm saying. You're fighting a caricature, whereas I'm saying there are better ways to run these things and deliver the safety net we want. And I think Trump represents that. It's not obvious he does, but that's what he does.
I would agree.
Hey, Matt, we have time for your response here.
Yeah,
but
I got to
we'll
respond
have to wrap
this.
up after that.
Yeah, because... so, wow, I just lost like half my train of thought right there. As soon as we mentioned Trump, it just happens every time. Okay, so there are things about the system that I'm in complete agree with you. I'm not denying the facts. There are certain things about what you said where you're talking about the guy going in for services is not paying for it. The unfortunate fact is that there are guys who are going in who are paying for it directly because of problems with insurance and other things. It's not always just the insurance. Now, the prices, I agree with you on the economics of how this ends up happening and how they end up raising. The problem is that there are also guys who aren't paying for it because they can't afford it. They don't have insurance. They can't get it. And the example that you came up with of going into the grocery store and taking what you need, first of all, we could have a conversation about food, but I'm not going to go in for 3 root canals just because they're free. I'm not going to go in to have 15 gallbladders removed just because I'm not paying.
Let's pause right there.
So
I agree with those examples, but they're misleading examples.
No,
they're not
your
typical.
example was monumentally misleading to suggest that it's somehow the problem that if we start giving people health care, that they're going to necessarily take advantage of it, even though we know human behavior will have people take advantage of it, not in the way of let me grab as much milk as I can. That was my problem with the example. There are ways to fix the system to lower the prices so that we're not, because, by the way, the insurance companies are not getting screwed. They're making money. And so the guy who goes in who's not paying for it, it's not the insurance guy that's getting screwed, it's everybody else. And the other thing is, if the doctor tells me I need 7 tests, and this doctor tells me I need 4 tests, and I'm not a doctor, what if one of those 3 tests is what I actually need? This is the problem, because we have people who are, okay, yeah, there's people who are lazy thinkers, and people, but generally, I don't have time to become an expert on everything.
No, you don't.
And so I have to rely on experts. And so if the doctor says I need 7 tests, going to the guy that's got 4 tests doesn't mean I've done anything to improve the likelihood that I'm going to be healthy. It just means I saved a couple dollars. And if the focus is on getting me healthy, and we change the way the health system works so that people can go in and get whatever tests the medical community feel are necessary to best diagnose their thing, to best diagnose their issue, that's what we should be aiming for. I'm not proposing any solution. I'm not an economist. I don't necessarily buy into what individuals are saying. I'm just saying if we're going to use examples, let's put the blame where it should be. Let's put the responsibility where it should be. It's not somebody coming in to screw over their insurance company because they're in pain. And the insurance company is going to pass on that cost to all of us. So the real scam, from my perspective, and I fully acknowledge that I could be monumentally wrong here, is that you want to call it a scam in that there's a conspiracy amongst the medical community to scam the insurance community out of as much money as they can. And my view is that it's a scam in the sense that we've convinced people that healthcare needs to be expensive and that it's not something that people should have access to. And if we just point to this is the scam, the true scam is when we make it so that there are people who are dying for treatable things. Because the person who goes in to get their flu shot protects you and me too.
Of course.
And it helps us to have a healthier society. It's not 10 gallons of milk. And by the way, there are people who need probably 10 gallons of milk. They have way more kids than I'm ever going to have. I'm never going to have kids. And once upon a time, I had this notion of, why the hell should my tax dollars go to somebody else's kids going through school?
Yeah, but that's not what I'm saying.
But they should go to that because those kids are part of my community. They're going to be the ones that are working. They're going to be the ones that are curing whatever cancer I end up with in 20 years. It's worth it, even though I don't have kids, to provide and contribute to the society that I benefit from, which I don't think you deny.
I don't deny that at all.
That was me preaching. That's something I don't think he denies.
Right. So we shouldn't knock straw men here. The scam of healthcare.
Hold my beer.
The scam of healthcare, at least Obamacare, was a scam between the government and the insurance companies against the American people. And here's what I mean. Obama went to the healthcare companies, which he knew would oppose Obamacare because it involved greater federal control. And Obama basically said, listen, guys, I'm going to give you the greatest profit windfall in your history. Why? I'm going to force every living American to buy health insurance. It's not optional. It's kind of like if I were to force every American to buy broccoli. The broccoli industry would be orgasmic with delight. So you are going to be making money hand and foot because there are a lot of people, young people particularly, who may not even need insurance. They're perfectly healthy. They can make a decision for themselves about whether they want it and what kind of insurance they want. I'm going to shove it down their throat whether they want to or not. In exchange for this profit windfall, I want you to lobby for Obamacare. I want you to fund my campaign. So we will go into this together. And so all the insurance companies, if you notice, we're all for Obamacare, running ads for Obamacare. Why? Because Obamacare was a scam perpetrated between the government and the industry, not the first time in history, by the way, on the American people. That's point one. Point two, the vast majority of our healthcare budget goes on older people. Not surprisingly, that's when you need the most healthcare. But that's when your root canal example completely breaks down. Because anybody who is in the healthcare industry or works in a hospice or even works in a hospital as a nurse dealing with old people recognizes that we have a massive problem in our society, and it may be more unique to Western society, of loneliness. Loneliness. Old people, by and large, don't live with their kids. They don't see their grandkids. So because of loneliness, healthcare becomes a form of counseling, of therapy. I need this, I need that.
So first of all, I'm in favor of counseling and therapy, especially for the elderly.
No, but I'm just saying it is an empirical fact, and you're all about empirical facts in the world. It's an empirical fact that the demand for healthcare in the elderly community is huge. And a lot of it, and some of us may know this from personal example, that people like to see the doctor because because the doctor is, first of all, one of the few people who takes a direct personal interest in them, will spend by and large as much time as they want with the doctor because he's billing.
I get it.
So all I'm getting at is this: it's not like a root canal. You and I hate to see the doctor, we hate to see the dentist, we would never go for any reason other than we are being dragged there by our spouse or whatever. But I'm saying there are lots of people who like going to the doctor, who like to actually discuss their ailments, who think they have more ailments than they actually have.
If you can show, if you can show that this is a significant contributor to healthcare prices, I'll buy you a steak dinner.
Okay. If I can show you, okay.
I think that it's good to end on that. That's a good deal.